Hello everyone, welcome to BISP Solution. I am Preeti, working as Oracle Fusion Functional Consultant. So in today's session, we will discuss the rest of the topics related to project portfolio management. So in today's session, we will discuss how to import the non-labor cost, how to create the expenditure batch. These are the expenditures which are required the approval, and then we will see how to apply the transaction control on project basis and on task level. Now we will first take a quick overview of the topics that we have completed till date. So in the beginning we have discussed how to create the implementation user, and then we have seen what are the roles that you have to provide to that user so that that user can perform the configurations related to this module. Then we have seen how to give the data access and at what level you have to give the data access to the user so that he can create the project and can perform the configurations related to project portfolio management module. Then in case you want to provide the limited access to any user, then in that case you cannot use the predefined roles that is provided by the Oracle. For that purpose you have to create your own role that is called custom roles, and then you have to provide the same to the user with limited access. There you can reduce the privileges for the specific user. Then we have seen how to create the reference data set in the application, and the project portfolio management module is the module that works on the business unit level. So we have seen how to create the business unit in the application, and the related task we have done in the application. Then we have seen how to create the department and how to classify that department into project task owning organization and project expenditure organization. So earlier in the EBS we didn't have the functionality of creating the project unit, but in the Fusion we have a functionality provided by the Oracle that to create the project unit for the line of business. This is used for reporting purpose. Then we have seen how to create the hierarchies and classification in the application. Then we have seen we have to create the organization tree, and under that tree we have to create the version. Under that version we have to enable all the organization that we have created. If in case we miss any organization into this organization tree, then we won't be able to use that organization while creating the transaction in the project. Then in the next session we have discussed how to create the specific calendar for project in case you are using the different calendar for project purpose. So in the project portfolio management module we see that the Oracle provides the functionality to use different calendar as your general ledger calendar. Say in case you in the project you are using the frequency of period as weekly, then in the project you can create your own calendar. You can create the calendar as per your business requirement, which can be different from the general ledger module calendar, and this is a functionality which is not available in any other module. This is exclusively available only for project module. Here you can use the accounting calendar which we are using in general ledger module, or you can use the project accounting calendar which you will create specifically for the purpose of PPM module. Then we have seen how to create the project type, then how to configure the project numbering. Here you can provide the manual numbering or automatic numbering. Then in the next session we have seen how to create the project template. We will use the project template while creating the project, and we have seen that there are some roles that require the data access at business unit level. After giving those data access to your user will be able to create the project. If you will not provide the data access to the user, then he won't be able to create the project. So project accountant, project manager, project administrator are the roles that require the data access at business unit level to create the project. Then we have seen how to create the revenue category, expenditure category and unit of measure, and how to assign all three of them while creating the expenditure type class. Then we have seen how to create the project class category, service type, work type, how to create the project status and link it to the system status, and how to create the workflow structure. Then we have seen how to create the project roles and how to associate those project roles with the enterprise roles. Then we have seen what are the resource classes available in the application. Then we have seen how to create the project plan type, and while creating the template you have to select the project plan type. Without selecting the project plan type you won't be able to proceed further. So this is the very mandatory setup, and it is used for the planning purpose. Also in the financial plan type it is used for the budgeting purpose. Then we have seen how to create the rate schedules, labor costing rules, labor costing multiplier, and in the organization costing rules we have to associate these rate schedule and labor costing rules with your business unit, so that it will be easy for the system to pick the rates of your resources from the organization costing rule task. Then we have seen that we cannot give the accounting manually for subledger accounting purpose in the project module. So for that purpose you have to create the SLA configuration in the application. For that you have to create description rule, mapping rule, account rule, and you have to associate the account rule in the journal entry rule set. Then we have seen how to create the accounting method for project module purpose. Then how to activate the subledger journal entry rule set assignment with the task. We have seen we can do it in the accounting method also, but there is a specific task for activating the subledger journal entry rule set. Then in the specify ledger option you have to select your accounting method. Then only the system will be able to pick your accounting method from the specify ledger option. Then we have seen without creating the transaction source in the project module you won't be able to create any transaction in the projects. So for that purpose we have to do the required configurations for transaction source. Then we have seen how to create the standard cost collection flex field. If you want to track the asset on any additional information basis, then you have to create the value set, and you have to assign that value set in the descriptive flex field. Then in case you are using any attachment categories, you have to create the one, and it works at user level and you can use it in the project. Then if you want to prioritize your projects, then you have to use project priority values. If you are using any kind of node type in the project, then you have to use this task, that is project node type, and you have to assign the same while mapping it. Then in the yesterday session we have seen how to import the cost through ADFDI file and how to import the cost to the project manually. Now in today's session we will see how to create the non-labor cost, expenditure batch, and transaction control. So let's move to our application to see how we can create the non-labor cost. So let me give you one example. Say we have one equipment in our organization and our projects are using that equipment for their business purpose. Now how you will distribute the cost of that equipment to the different projects? So what we will do, we will create the equipment cost on the basis of hour and it will charge on the hour basis. Say I have a project A and is using the equipment of the organization for 10 hours. So whatever the 10 hours rate is available for that equipment, it will be applicable to that project. Say I have 1 hour rate for that equipment as 50 and I'm using that, my project A is using that equipment for 10 hours. So 500 will be charged to that project. So we will see how to do the configuration for the same. Let's move to our application. So before creating the non-labor cost transaction, we have to do the following setups. We have to create one expenditure type for that purpose, and then we have to create the non-labor resource. Then we have to create the rate schedule for the same, and then in the organization costing rules we have to associate that to our business unit, and then only we will be able to create the non-labor cost transaction with that expenditure type. So for that, first we have to go to the setup and maintenance. Go to project financial management here. Go to project foundation. First we have to create the expenditure type for this non-labor purpose. Click on this create icon. Give the name here. So I am creating the usage transaction. Let's take miscellaneous expenses as expenditure category. Now here I will take the unit of measure as hours. So I want to charge the cost on the hour basis for any equipment used by any project. Click on this rate required checkbox. Give the start date here. Now come to the expenditure type class. Click on this create icon. Here you have to select the usage as expenditure type class. Now select the assign set here as common. So we have created the expenditure type for non-labor cost purpose. Now click on save and close. Now go to the next task, that is manage non-labor resources. For creating the new non-labor resource, you have to create. So for that purpose, click on this create icon. Now say there is some machinery that we are using for project purpose. Create the non-labor resource for that machinery. Now here you have to select the expenditure type that we have created in our last task. You can see this is the expenditure type that we have created now, because in our last practice we have clicked on rate required, therefore it is enabling automatically this checkbox, that is equipment resource class. Now here you have to select the organization that can use this non-labor resource. Now whatever the organization you will mention here in this field, only those organizations will be able to use this non-labor resource in their projects. So we have created the non-labor resource. Now click on save and close. Now go to rate schedule. Now here we will create the rate schedule for this non-labor resource that we have created now. Click on this create icon. Here you have to select the reference data set, so take it as common. Now in the schedule type, you have to select it as non-labor. Select the currency here. I am taking it as USD. Now click on this create icon. Now the non-labor resource and the expenditure type that we have created in our last practice, you have to assign it here. Select the expenditure type. So this is the one that we have created. Now these tabs got activated because while creating the expenditure type PPM usages, we have selected as non-labor. Now select the non-labor resource that we have created. Now there was only one non-labor resource which was associated with this expenditure type. That's why system is displaying it automatically. Now say if you want to maintain the rate for this machine for organization specifically, then what you will do, you will select the organization here and will select the rate, and accordingly system, while creating the transaction in the project, it will pick those rates. So you can see here it is not star marked here, so you can leave it blank. In case you want to use different rates for different organization, then in that case you can create the non-labor resource rates specifically for every organization. But right now I want to use the same rate for every organization, so I am not filling anything in it, so I am leaving it blank. Now here you have to mention the rate. You can see the unit of measure. What will be the rate applicable while creating the cost in the transaction for this non-labor resource? You can mention it here. Say I am charging $120 per hour for this equipment or machinery. Now click on save and close. Now let's move to next task, that is manage organization costing rules. So in this task you have to associate the rate schedule with your business unit, then only system will be able to pick these rates for the non-labor resource transactions. Click on this create icon. Now select the business unit here. See, you can select the expenditure organization. If in case you want to use different rates for those organization, you can select it here, but I am leaving it blank. In the schedule type you have to select it as non-labor. Now you have to give the rate schedule here, the one that we have created. So this is the one that we have created. Now click on save and close. Now let's go to the cost workbench area, and there we will create the non-labor resource transaction. Go to project here. Now go to cost workbench area. Now go to task list here. You can see here the task that is manage unprocessed cost. Go here. Now for creating the new unprocessed cost, you have to click on this create icon. Now give the expenditure batch name here. Select the business unit, then select the transaction source here. Now click on OK. Select the project number here. Select the task number. Select the expenditure item date. Now search for expenditure type, that is PPM usages, because we are creating the cost for non-labor resource transaction. Select the expenditure organization here. Now select the quantity here. I am using it for 20 hours. give the original transaction reference. Here you have to select the non-labor resource. When in expenditure type, you will select the usage, then non-labor cost related information will get activated and you have to fill out here. So this is the only non-labor resource that we have created for this business unit. So select it, and now in the non-labor resource organization, select the transaction that we are creating for this organization. Now click on save. And click on import cost. Click on yes. Okay, so there is some issue in the dates. So it is not taking the same dates. Let's try to take the date of today here, and then we will see whether the system is accepting the non-labor resource cost. Again, go to manage unprocessed cost. click on save. So I will check the error and will let you know tomorrow. So there are some issues in the date, and this is how we will import the cost for non-labor resource transaction in the projects. Now we will move to our next task, that is creating the expenditure batch. So if you want to create the expenditure, and if those expenditure require to go through the approvals, then you have to first create the expenditure batch, and here it will only create the expenditure batch. It will not directly import the cost because approvals are required. So it will create the expenditure batch, and then you have to submit it and release the batch only after approval. So for that purpose, you have to go to the cost workbench area. Click on task list. Now go to manage expenditure batch. Now from here you can create the labor expenditure batch and non-labor expenditure batch. So go to labor expenditure batch. So when you will create the expenditure batch, it will only create the batch, and then it will require the approval, and only after that you can release this batch and you can import the cost for the projects. Now click on open file. So it will import through ADFDI file. Select the business unit here, and because we are creating the labor cost, it is taking the document as time card. Give the expenditure batch name here. Now select the document entry here. Give the expenditure date here. Now select the person name. Click on OK. Now select the project name here. Select the task for which you want to import the cost. Click on blind search. Click on OK. Select the expenditure type here. Select the expenditure organization. Give the number of hours here. So we have filled the required fields here. So this sheet is same as we filled yesterday for importing the cost through ADFDF file. Now click on export. Today only through this sheet we will only create the expenditure batch. It will not import it to your project. Enable this checkbox and then click on OK. So it is uploaded successfully. Let's click on OK. Now go to schedule processes. So you can see here this the process that we have submitted is successfully loaded in the application. Click on the generate output report. From here we can see the report. Click on republish. So it is imported successfully, and if there will be any errors you will be able to see here, but right now there are no errors in the sheet and it is uploaded successfully. Now again go to cost workbench area. Now from here also, by refreshing this page, you can see that the expenditure batch that we have created is successfully loaded here. So this is the expenditure batch. So in this way you can create the expenditure batch, and after the approval only it will be submitted to release the cost in the projects. Now we will move to our next task, that is transaction control. So what is the transaction control? So when we want to restrict any task to use the expenditure type, then at that time we will create the transaction control. For example, we want some project to use only miscellaneous expenditure type for the transactions purpose. Then what we will do, we will go at project level and we will create the transaction control, so that that project can only use the task that is miscellaneous expenses. Other than that, it won't be able to use any expenditure type to create the transaction in the project. Same we can do it on the task level. So we will move to our application to see how we can apply the transaction control. Now go to project financial management. Here first we will see how to apply the transaction control at project level, and then we will see how we will apply the transaction control at task level. Click on this project. Now for applying the transaction control at project level, we will go to manage financial project settings. So click on this first option. So you can see the transaction control. In the financial tab you can find the transaction control field. Now from this edit icon you can edit the controls. Click on this edit. So now there are two type of transaction control. First is inclusive and second is exclusive. So when you select the inclusive transaction control, only the transaction control or only the expenditure type that you have given in the inclusive transaction control, your project will be able to use only those transaction controls, or it will be able to use only those expenditure type. Other than those expenditure type, your project will not be able to create any kind of transaction in the project. But when we go for exclusive, you can create the exception. Other than that expenditure type, all the expenditure type are allowed and will be able to proceed further with. Now if at project level I will select the inclusive, then here I have to give some value. Only those value your project will be able to use to create the transaction. But at project level we use the exclusive level, and when we are not mentioning any condition or value here, that means all the expenditure type usage will be available while creating the transaction in the project. So here you have to give the start date, to date, and then you have to give the expenditure category, expenditure type, non-labor resource, person, job, organization, and whether it is chargeable or not. So in the inclusive, only the expenditure type that we have selected there, your project will be able to use only those expenditure type while creating the transaction in the project. And when you select exclusive, that means you are creating the exception. Other than that expenditure type that you have taken in the exclusive, all the expenditure type are available to create the transaction in the project. Now this was all about creating the transaction control at project level. Now we will see how to create the transaction control at task level. Click on the project and click on Manage Financial Project Plan. Now whenever we create the transaction control at task level, it will always be applicable to the lowest level. So right now you are not able to see the tab transaction control here. So go to view, go to columns. If you want to see all the columns, simply click on show all. Now here you can find the transaction control column. Select it. As I told you, you will be able to apply the transaction control only on the basis of lowest task level. Now say I want to create the transaction control for this project kickoff task. So I have to click on this transaction control, and now here it will ask for inclusive or exclusive. Say I want this task to only create the transaction with the expenditure type as miscellaneous. Give the start date here and then give the expenditure category. Let's take it as miscellaneous. Let's take it for PPM travel, and I want this task to create the transaction only with the travel category. Now go to system person type, will be taken as employee, and this cost will be chargeable to the project. Now click on save and close. In the next task, what I will do, that this 1.2 requirement workshop will not be able to use the travel category expenditure type for creating the transaction in the project. So for that I have to go to the transaction control. Now I have taken the inclusive as transaction control here. Now what will happen, whatever the expenditure type I will select it here, the project will not be able to use that expenditure type while creating the transaction for this specific 1.2 task. Now click on this create icon. Now you don't have to enable this checkbox because this is not chargeable to the project, and system will not accept when you will create the transaction for 1.2 task with the PPM travel category. It will throw the error while creating the transaction in the project. So in this way we can create the transaction controls and transaction controls are used for avoiding the mistake that takes place in creating the transaction in the project. So in today's session we have seen how to create the non-labor cost. Then we have seen when your expenditures require the approval, at that time you can create the expenditure batch, and whenever your expenditure batch will get approved, you can submit it and you can release the cost to the projects. Then we have seen we can create the transaction control at project level and also at task level. There are two ways to use this transaction control. One is inclusive. Whatever the values you will give in the inclusive, only those values you can use while creating the transaction in the project. Other than those values, you won't be able to create the transaction with any other value. And when you will give the exclusive as transaction control, then except that value, all the other values are available to create the transaction in the projects. So thank you so much for joining today's session. In case you have any query, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much. Good night.